One rainy night, a poor waiter gave 2 hungry orphans a free meal. 22 years later, a shining Rolls-Royce stopped outside his hotel, and what happened next left everyone speechless. It was a cold, stormy evening, the kind that made the sea roar and the wind rattle the windows of the small seaside hotel where James worked as a waiter. The dining room was warm, filled with the smell of fresh bread and soup, but outside, the streets were nearly empty. As James wiped down a table, his eyes caught a sight that made him stop. 2 small figures pressed against the window, their faces pale, clothes dripping wet, and eyes fixed on the plates of steaming food inside. They couldn't have been more than 10 and 12 years old, and they looked like they hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Without a second thought, James stepped outside into the rain and waved them in. The children hesitated, their bare feet muddy, but James's gentle smile convinced them. He seated them near the fireplace and quickly brought bowls of hot soup, slices of warm bread, and mugs of tea. The children began eating slowly at first, then hungrily, as if afraid the food might disappear. After a while, the older boy looked up nervously and whispered, "Sir, we don't have any money." James shook his head with a kind laugh. "Food is not only for those who can pay," he said softly. "Tonight you eat as my guests." The boy's eyes filled with tears, and the younger girl gave a shy smile, the first James had seen from her. When they finished, James wrapped extra bread in a cloth for them to take. At the door, the boy turned back and said in a trembling voice, "We will never forget you." James simply nodded, not knowing that this small act of kindness on a stormy night would return to him in a way he could never imagine. Years passed, and the memory of that stormy night slowly drifted into the background of James's mind. Life at the small seaside hotel moved in a steady rhythm. Mornings began with the smell of coffee and fresh bread, afternoons with the clinking of plates, and evenings with the soft hum of conversation from travelers passing through. James never earned much, but he had a quiet pride in his work. He treated every guest with the same warmth he had shown those 2 children years ago, offering a smile, a kind word, or a listening ear to anyone who needed it. Over time, his hair began to gray at the edges, and fine lines formed at the corners of his eyes, not from frowning but from years of smiling. Occasionally, on cold, rainy nights, he would glance toward the window and think of the 2 orphans, where they might be, if they had found safety, if they remembered him at all. But the thought always passed, replaced by the demands of the next table to serve or a spill to clean. The hotel itself had changed. A new coat of paint brightened the walls, and younger staff came and went, but James remained, a steady and familiar presence to locals and returning guests. Though his life was simple, it was not without its small joys, a compliment from a satisfied customer, the laughter of children playing by the shore, the peaceful walk home after a long shift. Still, there lingered a quiet emptiness, the kind that comes when acts of kindness fade into the past with no sign they ever mattered. James didn't know it yet, but the kindness he thought had been forgotten was on its way back to him, in a form so unexpected it would change his life forever. It was a bright afternoon, the kind where sunlight danced on the waves and the salty breeze drifted into the hotel lobby. James was behind the counter, polishing glasses as usual, when a sudden hush fell over the room. Conversation stopped, forks paused midair. Curious, James glanced toward the street and froze. A sleek black Rolls-Royce had just pulled up in front of the hotel, its polished surface gleaming like a jewel under the sun. Such a car was a rare sight in their quiet coastal town, and it drew every eye. The chauffeur stepped out first, opening the rear door with practiced grace. From the back emerged a tall man in an immaculate suit and a young woman in an elegant dress. Their presence carried an air of quiet authority, the kind that made people instinctively step aside. James watched them enter, his mind already wondering which wealthy travelers had wandered into their humble hotel. But instead of heading toward the reception desk, the pair walked straight toward him with purpose in their steps. There was something about the way they looked at him, an intensity in their eyes, as though they were searching for someone they had long hoped to find. James felt an odd pull in his chest, a strange familiarity he couldn't quite place. The man stopped in front of him, a faint smile on his lips but a tremor in his voice as he spoke. Do you remember us? The room seemed to hold its breath. James blinked, caught off guard, his hands still clutching the glass he'd been cleaning. A faint image stirred in his memory, two thin faces framed by rain-soaked hair, eyes hungry yet filled with gratitude. The feeling grew stronger, but the truth had not yet fully revealed itself. James's brow furrowed as he searched the man's face, and then, like a sudden flash of light, the memory returned, the rainy night, the shivering children at the window, the bowls of hot soup. His eyes widened. "It's you, both of you," he murmured, his voice trembling. The man nodded, his own eyes glistening. "Yes, it's us. You fed us when we had nothing, when we thought the world had forgotten us." James stood frozen, his heart pounding, as the man began to speak. He told James how, after that night, he and his sister had found a shelter in the next town. Fueled by the kindness of a stranger, he promised himself that one day he would stand on his own feet and help others just as James had helped them. It hadn't been easy. There were years of hard work, small jobs, and endless struggles, but determination kept him going. He studied, built a small business, and with time, that business grew beyond his dreams. Through every success, the image of James's warm smile on that cold night stayed in his mind like a guiding star. "I owe my life's path to you," the man said, his voice breaking. The young woman, now a graceful lady, stepped forward, holding James's hand tightly. "We never forgot your kindness. We came today to give back what you gave us, hope." The entire lobby seemed to fade into silence, the moment heavy with emotion. James swallowed hard, feeling an overwhelming wave of pride and disbelief. He had never imagined that a simple act of feeding two hungry children could ripple through time and change the course of lives so completely. But the man's eyes told him it had, and that the story was not yet finished. Before James could speak, the man reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope. He placed it gently on the counter and slid it toward James. "This is for you," he said quietly. James opened it with trembling hands and stared in disbelief. Inside were the keys to a beautiful new house, along with a neatly folded letter. His eyes moved over the words, each one striking straight to his heart, "For the man who gave us warmth when the world was cold." James's voice caught in his throat. I can't accept this," he began, but the young woman stepped forward, shaking her head. "You must. This isn't payment, it's gratitude. You taught us that kindness can change lives. Now let us do the same for you." The man smiled, his voice filled with emotion. "And this car outside, it's yours for today. Come, let us take you for a ride." Almost in a daze, James followed them out to the shining Rolls-Royce. The leather seats felt like clouds beneath him, the scent of polished wood and fresh air mixing as the car glided along the coastal road. They passed the beach where he had walked home so many nights after work, the town square where he had bought his morning coffee, and the pier where the waves crashed endlessly. James felt tears slip down his cheeks, not because of the luxury surrounding him, but because of the truth that had just settled in his heart. A simple act of compassion could echo through time, touching lives in ways one might never see. As the sun dipped low and the horizon glowed gold, James smiled to himself. That stormy night long ago had come full circle, and the warmth he once gave had returned to him 100 times over. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with others. Subscribe to Kindness Region for more inspiring true stories that warm the soul.